Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Halal Gap. I'm Sofia Alani, one of your co-hosts, and I am joined by...
Sikandar, your other co-host.
And as always, our awesome producer, Asif, where you at?
What's up?
Dang, I thought we lost him for a minute.
No, he's here. He's just stealthy. We have an incredible guest joining us today. Take it away, Sikandar.
He is an award-winning producer, podcaster, screenwriter, comic, musician, and cannabis journalist. His work has been featured on The Guardian, Complex Magazine, High Times, and The Huffington Post. And you've seen him on Vice, where his documentary Mad Honey won a Webby, and on HBO, where he was an actor on High Maintenance. Joining us from LA, please welcome to the podcast, Abdullah Saeed.
Ooh,
hey,
he's actually in
Palm
Springs.
He's in Palm Springs. Oh, man. I missed that part of the intro. My bad.
Sorry, bro.
It's actually Saeed as opposed to Syed. Although I've heard people say that this is just a different spelling of the same name because you see Saeed with a Y or, Syed or whatever. I have people in my family who are Syed, but mine is Saeed. I don't know if it's a regional thing, but yeah.
You know what? It's status quo for me. I have a tendency of butchering people's names. So if I got it right, that would have been more surprising than me getting it wrong. So, all right. Good to know. Abdullah Saeed. My apologies. We got that
good, man. No worries.
So we were talking before the show about how you might be the most fascinating guest we've ever had, who's got the most diverse career of all time.
That's very kind.
And we were like, where do we start with Abdullah? Because literally we can go anywhere, but we'll follow tradition, which for us means starting right from the beginning. And we know you were born in New Hampshire, but grew up in Thailand, which is a little more unique. So what took your family there?
My father is a professor. So basically, he went to school in Massachusetts and then was teaching in New Hampshire. And that's when my brother and I were born, my older brother and I. And then the whole family moved to Thailand. He worked at a university in Thailand called Asian Institute of Technology. And so basically I grew up on this campus. It was very, very diverse, people from all over the world, all speaking English because the school was taught in English. And I went to an American school sort of on the other side of Bangkok called Ramruti International School. I lived there until I was 13. And then my parents divorced and I moved with my mom to the New York area, to Long Island, and then later to New Jersey, which is where a lot of my extended family was already living. And now pretty much everyone is on the East Coast. I went to several different schools between New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, where my dad subsequently had settled. And then I went to college in Philadelphia. And that really was, a city that I really consider home in the United States. I moved there when I was 18. I lived there until I was about 26 or 27. And I really love Philly. I mean, a lot of the, the fondest parts of my early career, the first blog I ever did, which was called Adventures in Pork. This band that I was in that I'm still is my favorite music project that I've been involved with, which was called Sonny Ellie and the Kid. And then after that, the Kominas. And then I moved to New York to work at MTV. And I basically got fired from that job after 6 months. And then I got a column at Vice. And then started working there and then started doing weed stuff. I created a lot of the weed franchises there. And that's what sort of set my career, on the path of doing cannabis documentary. Cannabis is something I've always been passionate about. And it really felt like a calling for me because I am a person who is irked by the injustice, by all injustice, but, specifically my cause that's very close to my heart is, cannabis prohibition, because it just never seemed fair or right. And the older I got, the more I learned about it in its history, the history of its prohibition, the politics around it. It just upset me, that the world was this way. and along with many other people, whose collective will helped finally move the needle on the laws in this country. I decided to get loud and public about, the idea that it's ridiculous that cannabis is illegal. We live in a pretty silly world. A lot of times, if you take a step back and think about, the habits we form as a society, they're pretty ridiculous, and unsustainable and destructive, right? And if you can change one of those, right, in your lifetime, if you can help, if you can do like 1/1,000,000th of the job of helping to move the needle on that thing, I think that's, time well spent. So I'm really proud of all the stuff I've done in cannabis. It all really was always just about giving people something quality and entertaining that also is essentially pro-cannabis propaganda, which is what Bong Appetit was. You know what I mean? I don't claim, I've done a lot of journalism, but I don't claim to be objective. If you allow me to get a little abstract about it, I don't think objectivity is something possible. Like, I don't think it can be achieved by human beings. I think we're inherently subjective beings. But yeah, I mean, I really want to continue doing stuff in that space. But since I did that stuff, it felt like that was like a window of time where I had the opportunity to do it. Because actually, from what I find, the mainstream channels of media are still pretty resistant to allowing authentic cannabis people make cannabis content on television. It's not something you see. I thought that when I was doing it, that the floodgates were about to open. And they haven't. I'm actually disappointed. I was looking forward to seeing who would, make the next, really awesome, entertaining, educational weed show. And, I feel like there's a few exceptions, of course, but as far as shows that I haven't worked on, I don't like that many of them. Not to sound like a dick.
That's awesome. So I feel like you just gave us the full rundown in 5 minutes, but we're gonna unpack literally all of that if that's cool with you.
Oh yeah, and that's actually a past phase almost of my career at this point. Now I do mostly screenwriting work. That's like my main pursuit at this point. But yeah, ask away.
Right on, wicked. So let's go right back to Thailand if you're cool with that. And one of the things that I'm interested to see about, because you've mentioned this idea of acceptance in different cultures and different communities, whether it's in the Muslim community or in the white community or whatever. And I'm curious, just going all the way back to Thailand, where you said you were in mostly, it sounded like a very international expat type of a community. Did you identify at the time as like American, Pakistani, Thai? Like how did that upbringing, like how did that resonate with you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I have definitely my whole life felt like a person from nowhere, because if you ask me where I'm from and I give you a singular answer, anybody from the place that I'm saying would say you're not really from there, right? Meaning I'm Pakistani, right? But if I say I'm Pakistani, a Pakistani person would be like, no, you're not. You're American, and you're so not Pakistani. I grew up in Thailand 13 years, age 0 to 13. If I said ever I'm Thai, which I've never said in my life because I'm not, a Thai person would be like, you're not Thai, right? When I say I'm American, which I think is an inclusive term generally, but people assume that I grew up here, and I did not. And I think it gives you a little bit of a different perspective when you didn't grow up here. I really had the experience of an immigrant, despite the fact that I was born in the United States. So it doesn't totally define me. And when I say I'm from New York, I mean, I lived in Long Island for a little bit. I lived in New York City for 7 years. It's very hard. I don't want to be one of those people that says I'm from New York, even though I went to high school in New Jersey, right? I can't really say I'm from New Jersey. I only really lived there for 3 years. The longest place I lived in the United States is Philadelphia. But if I go around saying I'm from Philadelphia, people from Philadelphia are going to get really upset and be like, what? They'll say, like, wait, what high school did you go to? And I'd be like, oh, I went to high school in New Jersey. They'd be like,
what neighborhood?
Philadelphia? Yeah, and you don't want to get on people from Philly like that. And then, beyond that, I can't really say I'm from LA, even though this is very much my adopted home. It's where I live now, the place that I feel most at home in the United States. But I moved here when I was 33. So, I can't really be from here. So I really feel like I'm from nowhere, in a lot of ways, because I never know how to answer the question. There is part of that can feel a little bit lonely, like you don't have a home team in that way, right? But at the same time, the perspective that it's given me, I think, has allowed me to, be able to get the platform to do the stuff I'm, doing. Like I was not like an overachiever as a kid. I did not get good grades. I didn't go to like a particularly good college, and I didn't get good grades there either. And for the first like few years out of college, I just was around and like I was DJing in Philly and doing odd jobs here and there, a lot of random shit. That was like an interesting time in my life. It's sort of talking about like what the stuff that shaped my career. I mean, really what happened was, I went to school for marketing because I thought that, my parents thought that would be the best use of my sort of, being a creative person. I was a punk kid, you know what I mean? I was like a musician.
Yeah.
And I showed some talent with writing, early on. And so the idea was like, oh, okay, yeah, but, we can't send this kid to college for English. We're Pakistani. So they were like, the compromise was go for marketing, basically. And, and I thought, myself, I was interested in it. And then I realized that actually, like, the curriculum of that is really, really boring. I was just not interested. And I did a lot of psychedelics, at that time. So it's sort of, like the sort of rules of the world that you had your whole life start to melt away, right?
Yeah.
Like and then like in my life, I've had these really sort of big, drastic moments that end an era of my life. So when I was 13, I was just like a kid in Thailand. I thought this would be my life until I'm 18, and I graduated. See what happens. But then suddenly my youth was sort of ended, right? At age 13, like we suddenly moved to America, and it was difficult to adjust.
Was that a culture shock, or were you already very like aware of American culture at the time?
I was very aware of American culture at the time, but then you get here and it's a lot different than what you think it is. And I was in Long Island, which is a very homogenous place, and now, I guess, I don't know, it was probably conservative then as well. I mean, it was more in the sense that students there had never heard of Thailand as a country at all. So that's what I was starting from, where they would be like, where are you from? And everyone thought I was saying Taiwan because they didn't know that Thailand existed as a country. You know what I mean? And then also, if anyone did know it, they would be like, well, you don't look Thai, and then I'd get into the whole issue that we were talking about before about not really being from anywhere, right? But yeah, it was certainly a difficult adjustment. I would call it a somewhat dark time, at least in between there. But then, like eventually I moved to New Jersey and things settled down a little bit. And, then, that was when I got into punk music a lot. It's funny because I was I recently found a photo. Every time I go to visit my mom, she makes me throw out some of my old shit. It's like the pile is getting smaller of my memories. But like, I found a photograph of me at Warped Tour 99, right?
Oh, wicked.
In Asbury Park, New Jersey. And I have
Who was headlining? Do you remember?
Headlining? I mean, I remember AFI was there. Probably like Blink 182,
like
I think.
Time. Got it.
Yeah, and actually, I really, so I was into punk, but the band I was in, we were really into like older, sort of like harder punk as opposed
Yeah.
to the pop punk stuff. I hate pop punk. I really, it makes me cringe. I think it's awful. And I think part of that is also nostalgia because we were like punk kids who consider ourselves like real punk. Like we listened to like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys and stuff. And, you know, that was our vibe. We were very anti, you know, the trend or whatever, which I don't know. You know, when you're a kid, you're angsty and you want to be hype about something. But with that, it's like, you know, it's always stayed with me, my hatred of pop punk. But yeah, and you know, at the same time,
this is Average Citizen, right? Like
Average Citizen. Wow, look at that. Yeah, that's good.
We have good research over here.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. But so this was around that time, and the photograph I found, it's me with like red hair, wearing like a punk t-shirt, and very, you know, looking like I was in those bands, and that was like my style. But it's a picture of me and Cut Chemist from Jurassic 5 because they had performed there, and at the same time as I was listening to punk music, I was also listening to DJ Shadow and Cut Chemist, and you know, the Invisible Scratch Pickles and Dan the Automator and things like that. You know what I mean? Like I was really into hip hop, and that's because my brother had gone away to college, and suddenly his musical influences had just opened up. And you know, he really was he's influenced me my whole life. My older brother, like he literally was like taught me to play bass so he could play guitar over something. And you know, we grew up listening to all kinds of stuff. You know, we were really into the grunge stuff.
And is that when you guys made Cold Hands? That's the group that you had with your brother?
Yeah, that is the group I had with my brother. So yeah, Cold Hands was just me and my brother, and then Cold Hands Collective was like a larger group of friends who we all played together. It started out with my brother had a DJ night at a club in Philly, like a little tiny venue called Bembe, which still might be there actually. It's in Williamsburg. And so like this, like sort of, you know, like he would make beats and I was rapping and, you know, doing that type of stuff. And then we got like a couple of his friends in the band, and then one of my friends came and MC'd with us, and it was like a, you know, big group of people. And it was kind of, you know, it's funny because I feel like that style of music is very like out of style now. Of course, we're talking about like 15, 20 years ago. But it was like, you know, like live hip hop, like the Roots kind of, you know, like that vibe, which was a thing at the time, right?
With punk and hip hop, like were there any like punk influences in your hip hop, or was it just like a shift that you made?
Yeah, no, it's you know what? It was like just simultaneous. Like at the same time, I never made stuff. I mean, look, I've made a lot of music. There's definitely like rap stuff that's crunchier, or, you know, like more punky stuff that uses maybe like sampled beats or something like that. But beyond that, I don't like that idea of like, you know, crossing the two things. Honestly, it's all more in like just the method of making the thing. If you're sitting there with a drum machine or whatever, it's going to sound a certain way. I made both different types of music. And then also, you know, there's also this sort of third string to it, which is like, you know, things like Aphex Twin and Square Pusher and, you know, that's shit that's very, very close to my heart. Like when I sit around and listen to music, I listen to Aphex Twin and Square Pusher and this whole sort of, you know, world of, you know, there's a lot of artists now who are influenced by them. There's a label called Analogical Force that I've been a huge fan of more recently. And that's like, I've been listening to a lot of their stuff. And I used to make music like that as well, right? So in a lot of ways, and then I also was in a band that played more like prog rock type shit. So, you know, I never discriminated in the music that I was playing. Like it's, you know, I like a lot of different stuff. I like rhythmic things, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And all the things we're talking about are very like, you know, sort of rhythm oriented. And I grew up playing the drums. So, you know, different things have struck my chord, you know, at different times in my life. And I never really differentiated between those things. Like, you know, yeah, I was a punk kid in high school, and I really subscribed to that, the religion of punk in some ways, right? Which at that age, you were just like, you know, you just want to do. And then when I went to college, I got into hip hop and, more into DJing, turntablism, and, like into that whole world, more into electronic music. And then as just started making music in that vein as well. And yeah, I mean, look, I wanted to be a professional musician like since then. It's something I had always really wanted for sure. I still feel like I'm just a failed musician who like made some other shit work. In some respect, you know what I mean? But it is really a first love for me. But it was a hard thing. Like around that time, it was very difficult to, like it was hard to make something pop off in the world where like record labels were dying because illegal downloading was thriving, and there wasn't this sort of equilibrium that we've reached now where you can actually make a living or control your fate, as it were, as a musician.
Right. It was that in between time when like Kazaa and Napster and like torrents were just everything. Nobody really had Spotify yet, and I see what you're saying for sure. But I also grew up drumming, so I'm curious to know who is your any early drummer influences?
Oh wow, good question, dude. I love that question because I absolutely have a list ready to go. Chad Smith, Red Hot Chili.
Hell yeah, man! Chili Peppers are my number one for sure. Because I'm thinking from like perspective of like combining hip hop a little bit with the rock elements. Chad
totally, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, very big album for me, and One Hot Minute, underrated album.
Yes,
I sort of stopped listeting from Californication.
The Dave Navarro years are kind of a little iffy, but that's okay.
Weird years, but good stuff. And actually, some of these are definitely going to sound corny now, but Chad Sexton from 311, who is a great drummer, and I really liked 311 when I was younger. Brad Wilk, maybe I'm saying the wrong name here, but he's the drummer from Rage Against the Machine. Unless Brad Wilk is the name of another member, I may be misremembering that. And Clyde Stubblefield, of course, which is, I realized that a lot of the breaks I was listening to in songs that were, hip hop songs or whatever, came from just a handful of drummers from back in the day, one of whom was Clyde Stubblefield. And who else? I was really into Primus for a long time. I still, I don't really listen to, I was kind of, I wouldn't say I was a head because I had friends who were real heads and they were really into it, but I saw Primus and Les Claypool's tangential projects a lot. I listened to all that stuff. I was really into it. And it's actually, a lot of people might hear me say that as a drummer and say, oh, Tim Alexander, of course. Right. But unpopular opinion, I think that Brian the Brain Mantia is for my taste the more enjoyable drummer. I wouldn't say he's necessarily technically better, but he's sick. He's got a real style.
There's a new Netflix doc. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about like the history of drumming. It's amazing. You should check it out.
What? I gotta see that.
It just came out. Just came out like last week. Chad Smith is in it too, actually. It's like Taylor Hawkins, Chad Smith. Like,
oh, cool.
There's a bunch of guys on there. It's good stuff.
That's really cool.
How did you get connected with the Kominas? How did that come about?
So, Shaj was one of the founding members of the Kominas, and I go way, way back. And I mean, like, our dads went to school together. Our moms have known each other for years. Our grandfathers, it turns out, were also school year friends. We learned that more recently. It's just, I think, like a crazy thing. He's maybe just only a few months older than me, and we've known each other. There's photos of us as like little kids together. And when I moved to Massachusetts when I was like 14 or so, we met and we played music together. Him on guitar, me on drums, and we used to jam out all the time. And then, we sort of lost touch around college. I moved back to New Jersey, so we weren't in the same state anymore. And then, we always would get up once in a while. And then, I knew he was in the Kominas from the very beginning. And, heard the band, it definitely was excited about the idea that, oh, wow, look, there's a, that was a very new thing at the time, the concept of like, Muslim punk or South Asian punk or whatever.
Right.
And then I met Basim and the Ray brothers and a couple of the other people that were in the band at various times. And I was doing my own thing. I was like DJing and doing more hip hop stuff with Cold Hands Collective and all that for a while.
Yeah.
And then, that sort of ended. I was in Philly. I'd sort of kicked off my journalism, stuff. I was starting to write for the weekly and, do some other stuff. And then I was in a band. I was playing drums in a band called the Mighty Paradox, which was it was a really dope band, actually. It kind of had like a Rage Against the Machine vibe to it. But one of the two front persons is now an artist called Moor Mother, who some people might have heard. And she's really talented and awesome. So I played drums for this band for a little bit. And in the process of doing that, there's sort of like a black and brown like punk scene in Philly. And at the time, I mean, I haven't been in Philly for several years now, but this was like, maybe 10 years ago. Wow, that's actually, I feel old saying that now. It's crazy how long ago it was. But, there was like a black and brown punk rock scene. And there was like, a lot of different acts. And, this band, Mighty Paradox, was sort of part of that scene. We used to play these shows at a club called the Tritone, which doesn't exist anymore in South Philly. And there I met Sonny Ali, who at the time was in Popo, which was his band that he was in at that time. And we ended up playing music together. I forget how it all exactly went down. And we started playing music together. And that's how Sonny Ali and the Kid was born. And I feel like one of the guys from the Kominas, there was some internet communication between them and Sonny. And I was like, oh, I know those guys, whatever. So it all just kind of congealed.
Yeah.
It felt very natural at the time. And, we started playing shows with the Kominas. We started playing shows in Philly. I looked very fondly back at that time.
So so you've got your degree in marketing, you like have your music on the side and you kind of do a little bit of writing, but mainly and that's been like music writing till this point mostly, yes?
Yeah, some food writing, some sort of nightlife stuff in Philly.
How did you transition into cannabis writing through kind of what was that journey like?
So when I was in Philly, and I had started writing for the Philadelphia Weekly and for a few other places. There was like random online places that needed people to write news briefs or whatever. And I would do other jobs, and it was actually like a pretty like chill time. I was doing music. I was just, you could squeak by in Philly at the time. It was not an expensive place to live by any means. And I was really living that life and I was enjoying it. And then I got, I applied for a job. I was always, since after I got out of college, it was very hard to find a job. And that's how I ended up, sort of just piecing together living and doing my thing creatively. It's like you would manage to eke out a living doing that. But, I wanted to progress. I wanted to I wanted it to get bigger. And at the time, I remember meeting the editor, arts and culture editor of the Philadelphia Weekly. And we had a drink and he was essentially like, yeah, like this is the top of the pyramid here in Philly. Like, this is it. Like there's nothing above, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like literally, if you got my job, that's the end of the line. That's the, Philly's a small town. I really like this dude. And he ended up re-entering my life later because then we worked at Vice at the same time. At one point at Vice, they were like, "We're gonna hire this guy." I was like, "That guy's the shit." Yeah, like we're coming here. But he was the one that really like reminded
me. Top dog in Philly.
I know, right? Yeah, he was, and he was like a career music journalist, and I wrote something for him when he was at Village Voice as well. Really nice. Cool guy, Brian McManus. Yeah. So basically, at the time I started applying to jobs that were, like maybe I can make a little living. It's like get an actual job and stop piecing it together. And then I got an opportunity to work at this vertical of MTV called MTV Desi, and there's another one called MTV Iggy. Now, this is some really janky shit we're talking about here. It looked like a fake MTV site. I mean, sure enough, we had an office, but and it was, like in so many ways, I feel like you see this kind of thing, but it was like a little office with its own little politics for this shitty little website kind of thing, But at the time, it was my in, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, this is what I got going. Like, I'm gonna go at it and try my best. And essentially, I moved to New York to do this job. After 6 months, I lost that job. I was not gonna get renewed at this place. And I didn't, I panicked because I didn't really want to go back to Philly because that would kind of feel like I failed, Not that I think anybody else would give a shit, but, I didn't want to go back and be like, oh, yeah, you went and you tried and you didn't make it. And at the time, Vice was, was popping off, right? Mm-hmm. So, and Vice was like the cool kind of new-ish thing at the time in sort of a bigger way, right? So, they were launching Noisy, which is their music vertical. And I heard about this. And then there was a couple of strategic things I did to try to get in front of the right people, to pitch myself. It's like I knew that somebody at some event was, oh, that's the editor of this thing at Vice or whatever. So it's like I talked to those couple of people. I really, really tried. Now, at this point, I was motivated, right? I was motivated because I didn't want to feel like a failure to myself. Even though I just got fired from the job that I moved for, right? And I was really worried that, I was like New York was relatively expensive to live in. My rent was like twice as much there. And so basically, I met the editor of Noisy, and I was like, look, you guys cover like punk and hardcore and all that, and that world. But there's this whole world right now, this is back then, of SoundCloud and Bandcamp and all these sort of home producers. At that point, this is interesting, actually. At that time, right, internet bandwidth had crossed this threshold, which suddenly allowed anyone from anywhere in the world to pretty easily download music production software. And once they've done that and made their music, also it made them able to upload it to something like SoundCloud or Bandcamp. Mm-hmm. So SoundCloud, before what we know as like SoundCloud rappers, used to be all like bedroom producers, right? People who were just making shit at home and putting it up there. And it's this interesting world. And there were stars of that world who were rising and, doing their thing. And I was like, look, you guys don't know anything about that world, but I, have written about all kinds of electronic music. And I know this world. I've been in this world, since I was a kid. And you got to let me write about it for you guys. It's popping. Like, the numbers are there. And he was like, okay, sure. And they gave me a column. And I got like, I don't know, $50 a feature or something, right? And I would do DJ mixes or write or interview a guy, a producer, a person, whoever is, I found interesting. And in that, I started listening to music from all over the world. I mean, like, for example, like in Germany, they love like Madlib and DJ Shadow and then sort of golden era hip hop. So there's a lot of really awesome beat makers in Berlin. Like, some of my favorite stuff that I listen to are beat makers from Berlin, like Suff Daddy or like Torky Torque or whatever. And nobody knows about these guys outside of that, but they're sick, Or in like Toronto or in Montreal, there was an interesting scene. And I remember hearing like a bunch of people from like a bunch of Japanese artists that I wouldn't have heard about otherwise. And I've always had that sort of collector's mentality. I like listening to esoteric shit that no one knows about and, stuff that's like specific to my taste. So that was a cool time. And then, once I started doing that, I then eventually got a staff job on the Creators Project, which is another vertical that just sort of did like art and tech. So music and, stuff based on technology. So, I would interview people about like their musical setups. And this is where there was a one very cool producer person there, like boss lady there, named CL, who knew that I was into like certain artists and shit. And she actually, I still remember this because I appreciated it so much, and I do still, that she like would set me up with interviews with artists that I really, really like, knowing that I was into that shit. So I interviewed DJ Shadow. I interviewed Kid Koala, who was one of your Canadian guys.
Yeah.
And
He's one of us.
Zach Hill from Death Grips, which is like one of my favorite acts. LP from, people know
Yes,
from Run the
LP.
Jewels or from Company Flow. And I have been a very big fan of LP for a long time. And, I got to interview him. And not only that, but at that time, just by happenstance, there was a situation where I was smoking hash with him, and Killer Mike showed up, and they played Run the Jewels on the little boombox, and they were like, check out the shit we just made upstate. And we heard the Run the Jewels stuff for the first time. We were like, this is amazing. Wild. And then over the next year, it became like the hugest thing. Right. But yeah, so that was a really cool time. Yeah, and I mean, the countless other bands and artists that I really grew up loving and respecting that I got to interview. So yeah, that I really look back on those years very fondly. I got to, I was really empowered to do a lot of, what I'm best at. And, that doesn't always happen in life. You realize sometimes that it's not going to, life is not a storybook. There's times when, you feel total creative injustice, but then there's times where you're just totally at the right place at the right time, and you are empowered to do what you're good at. And I've been very fortunate to experience both, because you can't have one without the other, I guess.
Yeah. So around that time when you're at Vice and you're doing all these incredible work, writing and we'll let you hit your bong. That's the favorite part of this interview.
This is my work bong. I'm at my work desk. This is my work bong.
I respect it.
Wait, what's the difference between your work bong and your non-work bong?
Non-work bong is a dab rig, which is also sometimes the work bong, I guess. I don't appreciate.
Okay, so you're doing all this writing work at Vice, and then around 2015, I think you start to jump into the kind of the film side of what they were working on as a producer and host. And so, what was that shift like? Were you pretty comfortable getting in front of the camera now all of a sudden?
Yeah. Actually, it was a little bit of like a janky journey in that, I was working at Vice doing journalism stuff, and then I started Weediquette, the column, and that really became like a thing unto itself. It sort of like was my entry into the weed world. It was a thing that was like, people were digging on Vice, and then I was working. They moved me to Thump, which was the short-lived like electronic music vertical. And you would think a guy like me who's so into electronic music would love it, but I hated it because it was all like the worst music. Like it was like EDM, like club music. I'm not really into it. I mean, like, look, I like some Four to the Floor stuff, but this was just really bad shit, and I was not into it. So then I got a job offer at another company. Now, notoriously at the time, Vice paid very little money. So this was, I quit from Vice like 3 different times. I don't think people realize it because of, look, you look at the content and you're like, oh yeah, he did this and then this and then this. But there was a whole crazy backstory to that is, like that's unexpected or whatever, right? And basically I had that job and I started Weediquette, but Weediquette I was doing completely outside of my work hours because I had a full-time job doing music journalism at Vice.
Right.
Right. So it's like I had started Weediquette on the side, and the weekend editor at the time was Krishna, right? Who's this Indian dude who just started working there. So basically, like I did one episode of Weediquette, and then at the time I had gotten this other job offer for a lot more money, which was still bad money. That's how bad. That's what Vice was paying me. Was that even more than double what Vice was paying me? Was still shit. I'm still gonna have to have roommates and share a shower with 3 people, right? But like, so basically, I got this other job offer, and I had a conversation at Vice where I was like, "Look, I don't want to work on Thump. I don't want to work on this thing. I got this job offer elsewhere. I want to go work there for my day job. And since I do Weediquette outside of my regular hours anyway, maybe it's no big deal, right? If I let's just switch me out of there. But then I didn't realize that once I quit, that, you know, Vice is now, I think people are aware how butthurt they get about stuff. And basically, I had a call with the executive producer guy, who was this complete asshole, right? Who was like, he was like, oh no, you quit, so you. We're gonna replace you with Krishna. He was like, he's gonna do it now. And I was like,
for Weediquette?
Yeah, for Weediquette. That's how Krishna, as from my end, ended up hosting Weediquette, and I did not. And it really felt like this thing where, you know, in your life, you're like, oh, I'm making this progression. I wrote this column. It made sense. Yeah. I'm a weed person. I've been a weed person my whole life. And then you feel like you're on this path, and suddenly it's sort of like, you know, it falls apart in front of you, right? Because there's always going to be someone willing to take your seat, man. Like, you can't be mad at that in life, I think. I think that I'm glad that I had that lesson early on, right? Is that, like, there's not really any loyalty in this game to that end. I mean, you know, like, you can't knock somebody for wanting to come up, right? I will never knock another brown person for coming up in the game, right? You know, like,
fair enough.
So, but for me, it was like, oh shit, you know, like, that I really had to sort of like kill that dream in my mind, you know? But then I had this job at a company called Karma Loop, which I worked very hard on. Yeah. You know, I did some cool stuff, some stuff that I'm proud of. You know, I produced a few like rap videos. I got to produce a Prodigy from Mobb Deep video, R.I.P., which I'm very stoked that I got to do. I don't think it's one that anyone has ever seen, but I did produce one.
We also heard you became a joggers influencer while you were there too.
Yeah, this is so funny. I heard
a lot about your pants.
Yeah, this is a funny thing that keeps coming back, is that like I forget how I first heard about Xanarobes, which were like one of the early sort of, you know, jogger pant like companies, right?
Yeah.
And I just really like them because they look like regular pants, but they're very stretchy. Now, you know, I was like, especially when I was shooting stuff, right? I would, you know, you want to sleep or something and be like, wake up and be ready. You know, you don't want to be like wearing something uncomfortable or whatever. So I just started wearing these pants, and then I found like an off-brand Amazon shop that like you could get like a really cheap version of it. So I would wear them on my shoots and like destroy them, you know. And then I guess people who watched maybe Vice Does America or like some of my, you know, Vice.com docs, they were like, you know, oh yeah, like this guy's what pants is this guy wearing? And a lot of people started asking about the pants, and I was like, and I mean, like, it's now, you know, I am about that though. Like, I feel like I followed, you know, my professional path because I don't want to dress up. I don't want to wear anything that doesn't have like an elastic waistband. I had to wear a uniform in school in Thailand. It ruined me. Right? I really don't. I don't like to be uncomfortable.
Is that? By the way, on that, just not to digress too much, but you posted a photo of you recently of when Prince Philip visited your school in Thailand, and I've never seen someone mean mug so hard before in my life.
I know.
Was that just you hating the uniform, being like this motherfucker?
You know what? Every picture of me at that age is a mean mug. I feel like I was like a crotchety little kid. I think I was going through a phase. But yeah, no, but you know, Prince Philip, colonialist pig. I mean, of course, I think if you're South Asian, you have heard about Lord Mountbatten, who was the guy who like sort of like did a bad job drawing the border between Pakistan and India, and that's what led to like all kinds of shit. You know, whatever, post-colonial terrible horrors, right? But yeah, so you know, them. Looking back, I should have written more about that.
I mean, you can always go back and edit. That's the beauty of social media.
I can't edit history.
So you have all these kind of documentaries that you mentioned, and one of the ones that you won a Webby Award for, which Sikandar mentioned in your intro, was Mad Honey. In watching it, it's like seemed like a very, very cool experience. But I have a question after, but I wanted you to kind of talk about that a little bit, about like what was that like, and like in terms of the travel in the community and filming this documentary, like what was that like?
So yeah, I mean that I still think that's the best thing I've ever made in terms of being a film that I've taken part in. I think there was just really talented people working on it all around, and it made the experience really good. And the experience being really good made the film really good. And I'm so proud of that thing. Even if I hadn't done anything else, and I had done that, I would feel good. I would feel like I contributed something to the world because I think it's such a fascinating story. That story came around while I was working on development at Vice. So, I had done my first series for Vice. It hadn't been renewed, so I was just basically there working on, other pilots and developing some shit. And then this story came around, and the producer, Chloe Campion, who's a very, very talented producer, she did a lot of really cool docs there. But she hit me up about this story, right? And I was like so fascinated immediately. I was like, oh my God, like a psychedelic honey that is like sort of mysterious in the Himalayas. And like, I speak Urdu, Hindi, which you can get by in Nepal with because, they speak, they're familiar with Hindi from like Bollywood films and whatnot. So it's like you can pretty much get by. I remember that from Thailand and too, like the Nepali neighbors, you could sort of speak Hindi or Urdu with because they, would understand a lot of what you're saying, even though that's not their native tongue, right? But also, like that's what made it so interesting. Too was like, I totally was like, I'm leaving for 2 weeks. I'm doing this story. I was like, don't let anyone else touch this thing. I want to do this story, right? This is like perfect. And I was like, and I can communicate with people there. So it all fell into place. We went, and it was like 2 weeks. When they sent you out for stuff like that, you would shoot like a couple different pieces. We actually shot a whole piece about Hollywood, about the Kathmandu Hollywood. With like, we shot with like a co. That shit is really funny. Actually, I have the file, but it's not up anywhere because it was part of like Go 90 or some like thing with Vice that expired, and then it's like you can't find it anywhere now. But that is like it's one of the funniest things I've ever made, and it can't. We'll never see the light of day, which is a bummer. But so Mad Honey, I mean, the experience of it was like we were up there for I forget, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, something like that, and every day we would like sort of take this hike all the way to the top of the cliff, and witness them do each step of this process. It was really just, I mean, it's all in the film. The best parts are in the film, and it just like. It was such a head trip. The effect of the honey is really bizarre and different from anything that I had ever experienced. It's very hard to describe, and yeah, it just overall. And also then we, in Nepal, in Kathmandu, when we were in the city, they were shooting some stuff that they didn't need me for. I got to walk around and for the first time in my life, be in a place where I looked like everybody else as an adult. Anyway, look like everybody else and sort of speak the language as well. And suddenly like you don't stand out. And it's like, it's very interesting. And also I'm a real enthusiast of ancient things in general, so Kathmandu has a lot of history in it. There's a lot of, amazing temples and old buildings and, it's a really beautiful place and a beautiful country. I want to go back there. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, you promised that guy in the documentary, so you've got to go back.
Durga. Yeah, I got to go back and see that guy. I've been thinking about that more recently because, like at the time he was like, are you going to come back? And I was like, yeah, I'll definitely come back. And then, of course, like it's been many years now and like life takes you on a weird journey, but I hope I can go back. I would like to make good on that promise.
Yeah. So like the honey has kind of been, as you mentioned in the documentary, like a very kind of sacred ceremony, like the gathering of it and like that whole process has been like very sacred to the Gurung people in this region. And like I know that also you had kind of mentioned how like South Asians have a history with cannabis and I don't know if there's like the same kind of sacredness or anything, but I just kind of, it's like interesting. I would love for you to talk about that more about like our history, South Asian history with cannabis.
Yeah, I definitely try to promote this idea among South Asians that this is a part of our history, I've definitely had South Asian people sneer at me and say what I'm doing is, haram, or that it's, it's terrible, or it's bad. And I'm like, that's a post-colonial mindset. Like this shit is part of our history. You know what I mean? Whether you like it or not, cannabis is like in the Ayurveda. Cannabis is part of, Hindu ceremonies. Cannabis is a part of, Islamic mysticism. You know what I mean? Like if you are a cannabis person, I'm sorry, if you're a South Asian person, you are a cannabis person. Somewhere down the line, not very far on your family tree. Look, I'm half Kashmiri, right? My mom is 100% Kashmiri. This is a place that is rich in historic cannabis culture, right? Yeah, and the culture around it has existed for a long time. The history of how weed became illegal in the whole world is interesting. The most important aspect of that story is that it was completely the United States and other Western countries, particularly the United States, that made it prohibited, internationally, right? That wanted to include it on the international agreement of controlling narcotics and whatnot, right? Because this is like post opium epidemic, in Asia. So it was like, okay, we need to do something. The United States wanted to add cannabis to that list. That's what really, and that's what started the propaganda campaign against cannabis, which was a very successful one and a very effective one, because even in places in the world to which cannabis is indigenous, you have people believing absolute lies that it's some sort of poison, that it makes you crazy in some way, right? So in that, I think that as South Asian people, or as North African people, or as Middle Eastern people, or being from anywhere, there's evidence of cannabis being a part of Mediterranean cultures going back thousands of years as well, right? So I think that the more you look at it, you look at the prohibitionist mindset as a phase, which is exactly what it is. You realize that it's only a tiny, tiny speck in the timeline of the human cannabis relationship, right? And when you see it that way, you could sort of start thinking post prohibition, right? That's the world I want to live in.
And so would you, I know you've had small pieces of this kind of in the work you've done so far, but would you ever do a larger project on kind of that history and that connection?
Yeah, you know what? I have this pitch for this show, which is like the ultimate, my cannabis magnum opus. Because look, there's other things in my life that I want to do. In the last few years, I've transitioned more into screenwriting. So I got my first script deal to co-write this film for Searchlight and New Regency, which is who knows when that will get made. I have no idea, but thank you. Yeah, no, I just am happy that I finished something and wrote something. It's like I'm a working screenwriter. I'm in the guild. All that stuff is an accomplishment to me. A lot of people look at my career, look at my work, and they're like, "Oh, right, cannabis stuff. That's been my most successful stuff." I sort of just I follow the the current and I got the opportunity to screenwrite and act and do that stuff, and I wanted to do that stuff, so I did that stuff. My underlying cause there is one of representation, I think, while at the same time I think the message about cannabis is really important. I also think the thing that I noticed about being an on-camera person with the name Abdullah Saeed, who looks like I do, right, who doesn't trim his beard that much, that normalized Abdullah Saeeds or Muslims or guys like me or guys who look like me to a lot of people. So maybe, it's like if I can have some tiny change on how often somebody like me gets a dirty look at the airport, I'm happy. You know what I mean? Because it's like that's Americans speak the language of TV. They see something on TV, it becomes normal to them. That's why that show United States of Al, about the interpreter and the guy, whatever. Yeah, it's terrible. Okay, you or I is gonna watch that and be like, this is absolute garbage. But to some person in the middle of the country who's never met a Muslim or never gonna meet a Muslim, it has an impact. You know what I mean? I'm saying like I think it does. I'm not sitting here, making a case for that show. that show, but that's from our perspective, right? There are people who watch this stuff. Like I don't watch, anything that has a laugh track nowadays. I don't think, unless it's something old, but people still do, and that's an audience. Everything like that moves the needle. So I think that's why I'm out right now. Like the scripted shows that I'm trying to get out, the things I'm trying to get out are things that broaden the idea of what a South Asian can be on screen, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes honestly I'm like, why am I even trying to do that? Because in Hollywood it's like it seems like sometimes it seems like just impossible to be like represented as a human being if you're not a straight white male or whatever. And I think that things are changing, of course. That's really good, but they could be better. Sometimes it feels like you're banging your head against the wall, but you know what? I've been able to play a character who is, based on myself, who's like an interesting brown person, as opposed to a caricature, a stereotype or whatever. So, trying to do that's another, very close thing to my heart. I feel like that's where the real, next phase of my career is in some ways, but who knows? Yeah. Look, here's the important thing. I think also it's like to be a creative person. I always say this is like my mantra, right? Since we're here talking about creativity, I would do a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I'm a creative person, right? I didn't like set a goal for myself. I wasn't like, I'm going to be the guy or whatever. No, when I was a journalist, the future projection in my mind was the path was like, okay, I'll write a lot of stuff. I'll write bigger stuff for bigger places. And then I'll, write a book or whatever, you project this path. And then hosting came into my line of sight. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do this. And then I'll host that. And then I'll do that. Maybe I can make a living being a host because I enjoy doing that and talking about the things that I'm interested in and whatever. Right. And then an opportunity to screenwrite came along. And I was like, I'll do this. Okay. I'll look, I would do a lot of things. I also wouldn't do a lot of things. Like, I don't want to work at a hedge fund. I don't even know what that is, but I don't want to do it, right? That's like, I had an office job at probably one of the chiller places you can work in an office, or multiple different places. And I didn't really like it. I don't like going to an office. I don't like going in every day. I don't like the regularity of it and taking vacation days and waiting for the weekend and then all that. I don't want to do that stuff. It's like I want to do stuff that I like and enjoy, which is talk about cannabis history and or write or sit down and get really stoned and write a science fiction screenplay. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever it is, like the things that I enjoy. If I can make that work, if I can make a living doing that stuff, I will do that stuff. I don't conjure my career like I'm gonna do this. Like now I'm gonna start fermenting vegetables and I'm going to become the fermentation king of Palm Springs. Like, no, I don't plan shit like that. If it just comes along, you know what I'm saying? Then I just try it out and I do it. And if I like it, I keep doing it. And then whatever. There's things that I've done that I've been really good at and that have caught on. And it's like, oh, if you keep doing this, you can make it a thing. And I just fucking stopped doing that, I can't tell you how many times in my career that's happened and so then you look back and you're like, wow, I could have been a NPR reporter or whatever, but I just didn't want to eat whatever the shit that came with it that I didn't like or whatever. I got bored of it or something. Then I just stopped doing it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I just follow. If this is what I always say too. I'm getting old because I have all these adages, but if somebody ask me to do something, right? They're like, can you do this? Can you, whatever, write this screenplay or whatever? And in my mind, if I'm 40% sure that I can do it, I say, yes, absolutely. I can. Yeah. That's my rule. Because anybody can do anything. And again, this is, I feel like I have said this before probably, but, if you give me 6 weeks and the right resources, I could probably do heart surgery. How hard can it really be? Human beings do that shit all the time, right? A human being does that. that guy's not like a super genius or maybe
Right.
he is. I don't know, but then maybe I feel like you could probably do it. I can tell you with 40% confidence that if you want me to perform open heart surgery, I can do it after 6 weeks of.
Oh my God!
It's very
40% confidence. I don't know if I love those odds, but the better than zero for sure.
Yeah, just hope it's not your heart.
There's like exactly. There's like a level of like fearlessness, that you've got as it relates to trying new things, and then also succeeding in a lot of in all of these different things, right? Whether it's music or journalism or I know you did stand-up comedy for a while, and then
I wouldn't call any of that success.
No, for sure, I would for sure. But like,
I hear you listing the things. I'm like, oh yeah, wait, do I count those things as successes?
Nah, they're definitely successes. Definitely successes. But
I appreciate that.
At a certain point, do you have to consciously make a decision to cut it out to go to the next thing? Or how have you been able to balance multiple initiatives at the same time when they're in such different fields, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Like, I guess it is all writing in some ways.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that binds it all. Yeah, is even talking and doing jokes or whatever is writing in that broader sense. Journalism is writing, talking to people, writing. You know what I'm saying? Like being interested or whatever that might be. I think that really is the binding force. Talking in front of the camera, I think, look, that's something I enjoy and I think I'm good at and I would like to do more of. But I do such a specific thing in that way that it's like, look, that hasn't come up that much. Meaning, like, it's like I've tried to get my other cannabis shows going that I would host, but that's not where the yeses led me. You know what I'm saying?
Fair enough.
I found more of a path doing screenwriting stuff, and that's the thing is I still have it in my pile, right? And meaning, like, I know to expect the unexpected. And sometimes something that's been sitting in your pile for years, you know what I mean, will suddenly come back up. And, like, maybe you'll get that done. Maybe you won't, but it's a crapshoot. I think that's the thing. We're talking about, like, success in one thing or the other. The only thing I'm really good at is just, like, trying something out for the first time and then, doing it more if I like it and I'm good at it. 'Cause if I enjoy it, if you enjoy something, you're probably good at it. I don't know. Maybe that rule doesn't hold up in court, but I tend to think that's true. Is that if you're playing music with a bunch of people and you're having a good time, then the music's probably good. I don't know, but like that is you have to eat failure too, right? I think you have to and look, nobody's good at that, right? But you got to eat shit and you got to be ready to eat shit no matter what level of your career you're in, no matter what phase you're in. It always happens. Like, I'm glad that I have the opportunity to get obsessed with the projects that I work on for a period of time. Sometimes it's on and off, sometimes things are drawn out. Patience is a real virtue. I also went from a world where we were turning around like 2-day shoots into, half-hour TV episodes within a matter of days or weeks, you know what I mean? To, writing multiple drafts of a film, that maybe will get made 5 years later. You know what I mean? And it's who the knows? Like, it's really, that's the difference in that world, right? Like, it never works out the way that you think it's going to. And look, like, I mean, it like anything else, it has its ups and downs. I think you can't really draw too many conclusions by looking at the work somebody has done, like, that about, right? It's like until you really, like, you might look at somebody's shit and be like, oh yeah, this person, they just did that and now they're doing this. The assumptions that you make based on the things that you see people in or see people doing are usually very different from that person's actual story, which is like, we're all just out here, if you're a creative person, doing shit that that you think is important. And, if you enjoy it, doing the best version of it that you can. and then putting it out and seeing what happens. You know, it's like I've had misses.
Yeah.
Some of the best things I've made have been misses. You know, that will never be seen again. But you know, that's just how it goes.
That's part of the process, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but you know, like the last thing, and then I think we'll jump into our last segment, which is our rapid fire. But you know, something that you said in a past interview, you alluded to it earlier as well, which is, you know, just about how being a part of a conversation or a show or something like that, where, you know, the name Abdullah Saeed, when it's presented in front of Middle America, is doing more to potentially, you know, normalize that name in that moment, even though it's a weed show or even though it's, you know, whatever, then perhaps, you know, countless other efforts to try to combat, you know, Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hate or whatever, right? And so, do you think that, like, this idea that you know, we need to, and I just got a note from Sofia that I just butchered your name again, but that's okay. But do you think that this idea that, you know, we've been trying so hard over the last, you know, whatever, decade plus to try to, I guess, post 9/11, we're coming up on 20 years of 9/11 since this has been such a prominent example in the media now in terms of, you know, Muslims being a monolith in this particular way. And so much has been done in the last little while to celebrate these different creatives in the Muslim community. We do this too. That's the entire intention of the Halal Gap, is to try to showcase different creatives who are of Muslim background and you know, representation. Do you think the stigma around cannabis has potentially limited people's appreciation of the amount of work that you personally have done for the South Asian or the Muslim community to try to break down that monolith?
So you mean, in short, do you think I get enough love from brown people
for
doing what I do?
100%.
I think that's a very interesting question. You know, look, I really am, you know, some of the moments that have really touched me is, you know, a brown South Asian person, Muslim person, whatever, coming up to me and being like, wow, you know, like, my family thinks I'm crazy for smoking weed, and, you know, they think I'm terrible for doing it. And, you know, like, the fact that you're just there being real. My mom was on one of the episodes. My mom knows I smoke weed. She's cool with it. You know, she's a medical professional. You know, like, it's like, you know, like, those people, that really moves me in a real way. It never gets old when somebody stops me and says, yo, thanks to you, I was able to show my mom or my dad or my grandparents or whoever it is that cannabis is a normal thing and that normal people do it and that it's okay. And it's, you know, sometimes you need it as a medicine. Sometimes you need it as a life supplement, you know, like, whatever. It's like, whatever it is, like, I really, you know, that moves me. And, you know, when it's a brown person, it really, you know, like, saying that, and I'm familiar with that situation, it really does, of course, mean so much to me. I also know that there are brown people in the world who think I'm crazy. That is almost how I knew that whatever I was doing was effective from day one, was that, you know, you get people who hate, you know what I mean, who are sort of closed-minded. But look, here's the important thing. When I first started doing this, when I first started being public about being a cannabis person, right, I placed a bet on, you know, where cannabis would go, where the road would lead us, right? I was like, okay, either this goes where I hope it's going and I get to be a public cannabis person forever, or it goes the other way suddenly and I become a public criminal. You know what I mean? I become like a totally like a, you know, like a public figure for something criminal. And then, like, Trump got elected right in the middle of shooting Bong Appetit. And I was like, oh my God, like, did I make the wrong decision, right? But the thing is, you know, I'm passionate about the plant. And, you know, like, yeah, like I was saying earlier, you know, it's like the justice thing. It sticks in your craw. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want to keep it real. I thankfully have a very reasonable mom. My mom is an open-minded, smart person. She was totally anti-cannabis at one point, like most people's moms are in the 90s or whatever. And, you know, I've been able to show her through my work and just through, you know, like, she's been hearing the shit I've been spouting since I was fucking 16. You know what I'm saying? That the same shit that I'm saying about, oh, cannabis is not a drug, it's not a blah blah blah, it's not like the other things, you know, it's a life supplement, whatever. So, you know, she gets it. It's like, it is very vindicating to have like the world go your way in that argument that you have with your parents, you know, where suddenly you're like, remember when you used to say no for weed? Now they're selling it down the street. It's like
Told ya.
people's lives, you know? But yeah, no, but that I'm really thankful for, because not a lot of people get that. South Asian parents, immigrant parents, wherever you're at, they can be very, very strict, right? No, doesn't matter the religion, the background, wherever. We all know what I'm talking about. And
Right. Yeah.
you know, the thing that's really hard to make them understand is that, like, you know, this is our culture. This is our stuff. Like, you know, before, you know, the white man came and, you know, separated us into our, you know, into our corners. This is something that, you know, our entire, you know, intermingled culture was, you know, was sort of facilitated by. So, you know, that is... I don't know, man. I don't know how brown people feel about me. I have, you know, my own South Asian, you know, friends who I know are down. You know, and I just hope that I'm not out there for the broad support of any group. I'm out there to empower the people who feel like they're alone on this thing, you know, or the people who just, like me, it sticks in their craw. It feels like this isn't something that we should be shamed for. You know, I'm out here for those people. That's who you know, that's who I'm smoking weed in public for. You know.
There you go. There you go. Right on. So on that note, we like to end our segments with some rapid fire questions, which have absolutely nothing to do with your journey. Are you down?
Let's go. Let me take one bottle.
Okay. All right.
I'll finish this thing off.
Yeah, I mean, it might make the answers a lot more interesting.
Okay, I'll wait.
Woo! All right, let's do it.
Here we go.
All right, so first question is, which we've heard about your record collection. Which one is your most prized record in your collection?
Probably 2 remixes by AFX. I have an original pressing, AFX Twin Record. Oh, I also have a signed copy of DJ Shadow's Private Press. Definitely, that one came from my brother. A lot of those records are my brother's, but those are the 2 that come to mind. Yeah.
Okay, right on. Okay, what is your most rewatched movie?
Most rewatched movie. Superbad is one that I've seen many times.
Nice.
I do think it's a perfect movie. That's the one that comes to mind. But man, I mean, The Matrix is probably one that I watched more times than that. But that seems a little stereotypical. I'll stick with Superbad.
Okay. Sounds good. What's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Wow, the most expensive thing I've ever broken. Probably a laptop. There was a very, very expensive, like $5,000 bong that got broken on Bong Appetit, like the first day of shooting, I remember. I wasn't the one who broke it. It was a friend of mine. And I was mortified when it happened. That's the most expensive thing. I facilitated the breaking of. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that.
Right on. Well, okay, is there a movie or a TV show that traumatized you as a child?
Yeah, Pinocchio. I was just talking about this to my
Really?
girlfriend.
That movie was messed,
Yeah,
man.
it's
when they turn him into a donkey and like
The cartoon, like the original cartoon?
Yeah,
It's weird
the
stuff,
island
yeah.
of the bad kids. I was like, Mom, I don't want to go to that island. I'll be a good kid. You know, totally that. But I was just talking to my girlfriend about it. That was a lot of old Disney movies have these sort of horrifying scenes in them. But yeah, that one sticks out to me.
Right on.
Fair enough. So the trauma happened early. And then lastly, your favorite way to eat potatoes. So like mashed, fries, chips, whatever
if it's done
you want.
really, really right, I'm a big fan of the baked potato. Butter and sour cream and chives. But it's got to be done well. And I think that like, you know, it's like that means that it can't just be split open and you stick the butter in. You have to take the fork and mash up the potato in all the corners, and then put the butter and the sour cream in. But yeah, that's the one that comes to mind. I really do like potatoes.
One bonus question, just because of your background as a music journalist.
Sure.
CLB, Donda, or none of the above?
What is CLB? Oh, that's the
new Drake album. Certified Lover Boy.
Okay, man. Let me tell you something. I don't give a flying about either of them or their music.
So none of the above.
Nah, I completely don't care. I think that, look, if either of those artists was going to make a song that I, sit around and listen to, they would have done it by now. They've had enough time. I don't give a shit. I don't care if, I'm old. I'm 37. I listen to Aphex Twin and I listen to Kybris and Otto von Schirach. I don't sit around and listen to Kanye West and Drake. I'm not like a sorority girl. You know what I mean? Or like a sneaker collector. So it's none of my
Asif is currently dying in the background.
All right. Yeah, our resident sorority girl's really upset by that comment.
Yikes.
I'll pick Drake because you guys are Canadian, yeah.
All right, appreciate it.
Thanks,
I don't know if I like that, but that's fine. That's okay.
I'm okay with it.
Appreciate so much your time and being with it. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so check out my podcast, Great Moments in Weed History. We're putting out episodes all the time. We just interviewed David Crosby. It's an amazing episode and a bunch of other crazy shit, really incredible weed stories. So check us out wherever you find podcasts.
Amazing. Thank you again so much.
Thanks, guys.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Stay tuned for more episodes. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Arish Jamil, our tile artist, Narmeen Sayed, and our producer, Asif Qureshi. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. On behalf of Sikandar and myself, thank you for joining us. Catch you next time.